Alright, Shalom. Double honors to the apostles of GMS. Honors you brothers that be pushing this truth in sincerity. This is gonna be a short video, pretty much getting into the downfall of the world, the world reserve currency that you know as the dollar. And this article goes into how China and Japan are dumping lots of, loads of dollars of trillions, half a trillions worth of um treasury bills, of which um those bills come as bonds or IOUs, written up by these different banks that you have out here in the United States. Or another way to look at it is when you have the inception of the money that you have in circulation out there in the United States is it is all created from a IOU, right? A debt, and someone usually carries that debt and sells that debt. And as of late, and in past times, it's been countries like Japan and China. That's why a lot of people say the Chinese own the American people, because ultimately that debt, the only value it has is the slaves who have to pay it back off. Therefore, you get countries like China and Japan buying that debt off, so that the American taxpayer, which is you people out there, all right, will pay that debt back to them, all right, and so doing so, you become slaves unto the Chinese and the Japanese in a roundabout way, all right. So I'm not going to make it too long. It says China and Japan dump billions of dollars, and the brother, sent this article out in the chat, in the group chat, and it says over the past few years, the dollar has staged an impressive comeback. All right, now that's a false statement, because as he's going to explain here, man, really it's because other people's currencies hasn't been doing so well. So as a means of sort of cutting out, as a means of picking the lesser of the two evils, most countries are still dealing with the so-called Federal Reserve notes. But as you've been seeing in different articles and so on and so forth that's been pushed out there, man, you've been seeing it to where other countries have been coming together, like Russia and China. They're trying to get together and put together some kind of a world reserve currency and so on and so forth. All right, to where ultimately, they're gonna do away with the dollar. But when they do away with the dollar, they ain't gonna do it in such in a way that the Russians and the Chinese come together and put forth their idea. No, what they're gonna do is they're gonna pretty much do away with it, and so that the only other alternative is the RFID chip. Okay, so it's not because there's anything fundamentally good about this currency, currency's future prospects, but because for the interim, right, most economies in the world aren't doing so hot. It's just for a lot of investors, it is the lesser of many evils in the short term. So they view the dollar as a temporary safe haven. So they invest in terms of dollars and so on and so forth, because they can guarantee a return of some degree that's going to be better off than using other countries' currencies. For instance, if they had used the drachma, which was the currency out there in Greece, of which uh, um they would have made losses. So it makes sense to use a stronger currency, ultimately being that of the US dollar. All right. Um, it says, however, recent signs suggest that the dollar's rally may be coming to an end. Amongst them is the fact that China and Japan, the world's largest holders of US Treasury debts, have dumped a ton of dollars. All right. It says November marked a record month for China's um, uh, for China and Japan's, the world's largest, rather, November marked a record month for China in terms of the place of its liquidation of foreign exchange reserve. It says the people of the People's Bank of China reported on Monday, December the 7th. It says the foreign exchange reserve, which is mostly consists of U.S. Treasury debt. All right, so the Treasury out there in the United States, right, has to pass off that debt to somebody else. Somebody's got to buy that for it to mean something. And ultimately, It's them private bankers that you have coming from Chinese and the Japanese that buy that debt, and therefore you have that currency, that those pieces of paper that you have and hold dear to in your pocket, which is it's all debt. All right, it says, which goes to show you that this society is emptiness, because the very fundamental means of exchanging goods that you use is emptiness. It's negative. All right, going to show you that this place is going to be destroyed, man. So dwindled by another 87 billion in November. This constitutes a stunning 2.5% drop in 1 month. It says peaking at 3.99 trillion in June 2014, meaning to say, and I believe the American debt clock is something within the region of 17 trillion. All right, and if you think about that 17 trillion, and you got it to where China holds, you know, 4 trillion worth of that debt. That's that's a large percentage. All right, I think it works out. If we round off 17 to 20 and round off the 4 trillion that they've suggested was in 2014 to 5, we're talking about a quarter of all the debt that America has is pretty much owned by them Chinese. So that's a significant amount, man. All right. It says China's central bank has sold off more than $500 billion of mostly U.S. treasuries, accounting for 14% of its entire stockpile. It says this rate, at this rate, China's foreign exchange holdings will liquidate within 9 years. It says while there is no reason to assume that the current rate will continue for that long, it does illustrate how fast that the debt and currency markets are moving, hinting a possible instability ahead. Okay, so not only have you got it to where, what is it? Last week you had it to where that the Federal Reserve was raising the interest rates within America and therefore England. You got it to where the Chinese now are liquidating their U.S. Treasury reserves. All right, all things hinting towards what? Towards what we was gonna know itself as the biggest market crash that we've ever seen that's ever been recorded, man. All right, that's all that's pushing forward to. All right, and those are two major factors, man. Those are two huge major factors. All right, the interest rates going up, and this as well. It says right behind the largest U.S. Treasury holder is the second largest, Japan. And pretty much what these countries are doing, they're trying to cut back on their losses, because right now you can sort of sell off the U.S. Treasury bonds that they got, the IOUs that they got from the American government to these other silly countries, all right, and sell them off at a pretty decent price. But see, and it all comes after, all right, it all comes after that interest rate's gone up. So one could only assume that they probably seen, they put it up. All right, we know that the American dollar is gonna crash soon. Let's cut our losses, liquidate these treasury bonds that we got from these Americans, all right, and we can cut our losses. And that's pretty much what they're doing, man. Oh, another perspective to look at it from is the fact that that's them sort of cutting off the business that they have with the American government, man, with the Americans, and now they're shifting business towards the Russians, and there's ample examples of them shifting their business and their business interests into the so-called the new Soviet Union, as it were, man. Okay, so it says is Japan's Ministry of Finance also reported a sharp drop in its own foreign exchange reserves in November. Likewise, also mostly U.S. Treasuries. It says Japan's stockpile is now 1.23 trillion. All right, and it says down from 1.24 trillion last month. For a drop of 1% since peaking. Right, Japan's hoard has dwindled by 6%, and decline has so far lasted 4 years. All right, so that's pretty much it. I'm not gonna go into to pretty much to all of those, but you can see, man, That's another example of of pretty much the world doing away with America, them not allegiance with them, you know, doing away with them, stopping to deal with them, and so on and so forth. All right, and that's all going to spearhead to what's going to be the biggest economic crash ever, man. All right. So pretty much with that, I'm gonna say double honors to the apostles of GMS. Honor to you brothers that be pushing this truth and sincerity. Shalom.